Call the Finance Committee to order and ask Ms. Whitworth to come give us a report.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am here to present the final FY26 budget recommendation. I will be honest, not a whole lot has changed from last month when I presented, which is a good thing. But I will go over the highlights of that, and we can go from there. As you can see on this slide here, there's an additional $274.9 million that is being brought in excise. This is an estimate that will be adjusted in the amended. Our estimate is always provided to us from the state economist. OPB works very closely with the state economist on these estimates. The transportation trust fund fees and the transit trust fund fees, the 9.6 and 5.5 being added. This is truing up those numbers based on the actual fiscal year 24 collections, because there's a 2-year look back. And then finally, in state general funds, there's an additional $3.8 million, which is made up of an increase in airport aid, local roads admin, and the restoring of the cut to the locomotive diesel excise tax and rail. And I will get into some more of the details in a minute here. On this next slide, you can see the bar chart here. The roughly 52% of the budget is made up of capital projects, and that is capital construction, capital maintenance, and local roads admin. The routine maintenance bar is roughly 20% of the overall budget. As the commissioners say, this is basically roads, roadside improvements, and bridges. General operations makes up 11% of the budget, which consists of the administrative program, data collections, planning, program delivery, and traffic management. You'll see LMIG is 10%, and you can see here the additional $247 million equates to the 10% of excise. GO bond debt makes up 4%, and you'll see a reduction in our GO bond debt going down. In intermodal, it's roughly 3% of the budget. And intermodal consists of rail, transit, airport aid, and ports and waterways. And then payments to CERTA and payments to the ATL both roughly make up 1% or less. All right, let's kind of get into the beef of everything here in the individual programs. As you can see, the GO bond debt service has a reduction of $13.3 million. This is us truing up what the debt service payment actually is. As you can see, the GO bond debt service is going down. In airport aid, I will mention this in several programs about statewide changes for DOAS insurance and TeamWorks billing. You'll see these statewide changes in all the programs that house our employees. So here in airport aid, there's which makes up this $3.6 million, is a combination of the statewide changes for DOAS insurance, TeamWorks building, and an overall increase in airport aid. In capital construction, you can see an additional $170 million coming into the budget. This is to help us to do additional capacity for adding capacity for projects. In capital maintenance, you can see the additional $110 million. What this does is helps us offset inflation on the cost of resurfacing, because you've probably heard the commissioner say numerous times that we can do half the miles we once did in resurfacing because of the cost. And then lastly, in data collection, this $12,000 consists of statewide changes and an increase in cost to help with federal reporting requirements. In this next slide, you can see here in departmental admin, there's additional $2.3 million, and that's for increased IT costs and for cybersecurity. In LMIG, I've highlighted it, the 27.4, and that is roughly 10% of the excise tax that you saw on that very first slide. Local roads admin, there was an additional $5.5 million added to the program. And then in the planning, ports and waterways, and program delivery, we have those statewide changes that I mentioned before for DOAS insurance and TeamWorks billing. However, in program delivery, there's an additional money being added to that program to help deliver that larger program that we're seeing for the last couple of years. So there's additional dollars being brought in for that. on this next slide. In the rail program, there's $2,100 for those statewide changes for DOAS insurance and Teamworks billing. And then you see the $4.8 million cut being restored here to the locomotive diesel due to the suspension of collections. In routine maintenance, you'll see the additional $33.6 million being added to the program for increased contracting and material cost. In traffic management, you'll see the additional $8 million being added to support the districts and the TNC to streamline the review process of commercial driveways as well as traffic control device permits, to provide better customer service to everyone's constituents. So that was added there. And then there was also some statewide changes for the DOAS insurance as well. In transit, there is an additional $5.5 million being added to the Transit Trust Fund. A portion of this is transferred to the ATL, and the remainder is split through a formula distribution throughout the state. The $4.8 million for Transportation Trust Fund fees. This basically helps run the FTA program as well as providing matching funds. And then lastly, in state general funds, there's a reduction of $500,000, and this was a one-time cost last year. So it's removing that one-time funding for Chatham County that was put into the budget for last year. In this next slide here, you can see payments to the ATL. There's no change as far as the dollar goes. However, there was language that was added that requests that they evaluate the ridership program and report back to OPB, the House, and the Senate by September 1 on the ridership. And then lastly, in payments to CERTA, there is a $150 adjustment to true up the Garvey debt service payments. That is the fiscal year 26 budget recap. Like I said before, not a whole lot of changes. However, in closing, I would like to make a couple of comments. I want to thank the board and the commissioner for all your support during this session. I want to thank Julia Johnson with OPB, Abby Day with the House, Emily Elder with the Senate for all their hard work during the session. I want to thank Josh and Abby for keeping us up to date as things change on the dime going on over at the Capitol. I want to thank Clement and Andrew Heath for me pepper spraying them with all their intermodal questions that come across the table for airport aid and rail. And then lastly, I want to thank our fabulous staff, George, Sarah, and Kirkley, for all their hard work and dedication through this last session. I will say that we've had a really great session for the amended FY25 and the 26 budget. And Chairman, if there's any questions, I'll entertain.
Any questions for Ms. Whitworth?
Were there any major issues that went on?
Not in the 26 budget. There's, like I said, it's kind of uneventful, which is a good thing, Jamie.
Okay, thank you so much for your report.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else to come before us, we will stand adjourned.
Madam Chair, I'm going to call the Legislative Committee to order and ask Josh Waller, our Director of Policy and Government Affairs, to make a presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Snipes, members of the committee, full board commissioner, new board members Stoner and Stein, welcome. I am glad to be here today, really glad to be here to present the legislative wrap-up. You know, seeing these 40 days come to an end, it kind of maybe reminds you how Noah felt. So we'll jump right in there. There's our calendar. It's expanded a little bit, so you see the end of session. It ended on April the 4th. Georgia Constitution provides the governor 40 calendar days from the end of session to review legislation, either for signature, veto, or for allowing the bill to become law without his signature. So you can see that date would be May the 14th. So first in our highlights, I wanted to mention House Bill 575, which is the department's annual transportation code cleanup. The last time we were here, it had passed the House 164-1. Since that time, the Senate did a slight amendment, a friendly amendment, and they adopted it 50-0 on March the 28th. The House agreed to that bill, to the amendment 167-1 on April the 2nd, which was day 39. It was transmitted to the governor on April the 10th. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to the board for your endorsement of this legislation at the end of last year. You look at all four of those items, each and every one of them will contribute, if signed into the law, will contribute to the more efficient, either the more efficient delivery and timely delivery of projects or the more efficient clearing of accidents from our interstate. So it's a very critical bill, and we're glad to see it sent to the governor. And again, I also want to thank the SME offices that were involved in pulling that legislation together. A few other bills that we covered, House Bill 224, which just gives us the ability to enter into a contract, negotiate a contract with the U.S. Department of Defense for roadway maintenance or oversight, construction management of projects. Last time we were here, it passed the House. It passed the Senate on sine die, vote of 51-0, sent to the governor on April the 9th. Another bill, House Bill 164, which removed the sunset from the 2023 truck weights increase of the variance for certain commodities. It passed, last time we were here, it passed the House, but it passed the Senate on March the 27th by a vote of 55-1, sent to the governor on April the 8th. Two bills that we didn't get a chance to cover last meeting, but deal in the field of innovation and transportation. House Bill 156 by Representative Todd Jones. It adds two definitions to the Title VI. Now, most of our department legislations or statutory department statutes are in Title 32, as well as Title 40, which is traffic ops. But the aviation section dealing with the department is actually in Title VI. That's your trivia question answer for the day. And it adds two definitions, one for landing field and another for vertiport. And this is just to, as you see the innovation, you've seen presentations from Intermodal, Clement, and others on advanced air mobility, the eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing vehicles. So just to ensure that the code section and the department's oversight and planning for the future is fully encompasses the new technology, the legislation added a specific definition for vertiport, which you can see there, which I'll spare reading it to you. But that legislation passed the House and Senate and was transmitted to the governor on April the 9th. Another piece of legislation that evolved actually the last week of session, originally it was just granting an exemption from the 2023 EV law to a charger that's operated by a nonprofit, that's operated at no charge, and operated on an interstate right-of-way, which would really only be one charger in the state, and that's the one operated by the RAY, that it would exempt it from the electric motor fuel tax that was codified as part of, or affirmed as part of the 2023 law. Because that law also required the Department of Agriculture to develop a regulatory regime for electric vehicle chargers, similar to the way they do with gas pumps, the Department of Agriculture had asked for some more time to develop that framework, and so they ultimately decided to add onto that bill an extension of that 2023 law so that it doesn't go into effect until 2027. So originally it would have kicked in 2026, so now January the 1st, 2027. So that was added to it. That bill passed House and Senate and was transmitted to the governor on April the 10th. Two bills which we had covered that crossed over but ultimately didn't make it across the finish line to the governor, and that deals with the school zone speed limit cameras. House Bill 225, which was Representative Washburn's bill that would have repealed them, it passed the House, went to the Senate, was ultimately moved out of the Senate Public Safety Committee and handled by the Senate Rules Committee. They did make a change. They kept it as a repeal, but they delayed the effective date of that repeal to July 1st of 2028. So instead of repealing them in, I think, a year, it pushes out 2028. The bill would provide that in July 1st of 2027, no new permits could be issued, and then in 2028, the full repeal would go into effect. The Senate passed that bill with the amendment on sine die about middle of the day, and then it was sent to the House, but the House did not act on it that day. Then there was House Bill 651, which was Representative Alan Powell's, and it dealt with some signs requirements, some restrictions on the timing. The Senate also, it was in public safety, got moved to Senate Rules. They made some changes to it, kind of reducing some of the signs requirements, expanding the hours of operation, and so rather than the original version, which limited to 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, the Senate amendment would allow it the cameras to operate the entirety of the school day, but would require the local governing jurisdiction to have to adopt an ordinance, a public ordinance affirming these are the times of operation so that there is public awareness when the cameras are operating. They also they passed that bill again on sine die earlier in the day, sent it back to the House. The House was in the process of amending the bill. I want to say it was probably 8:30, 9 o'clock-ish. And in the midst of them amending that bill to send it back to the Senate adjourned sine die. So when they adopted and sent it back, there was no Senate to receive it yet. So that's why both of them will just still be out there for the next, and for 2026 for the second part of the biennium. With that, I am actually going to turn it over to Abby Handel on our team to go over the road dedications.
Chairman and Board, thank you for allowing me to present today. As Josh mentioned, I'm going to be giving a brief update on the road dedication program. So as a reminder, the road dedication process begins with a request by a legislator of a location that is then sent to the Office of Transportation Data to verify if it is available or if there are any conflicts that exist. That then prompts a no conflict or conflict letter that is sent to the legislator and legislative council. Legislative council works with the legislator on a resolution and a local ad that is run. And then as we approach crossover day, the resolutions that have all fulfilled those requirements by the Senate and House Transportation Committee are combined into a omnibus bill. So that's HR 7 and SR 8. And then as we approach sine die, the remaining dedications that have not been added to the other omnibus are, so in this instance, Senate added additional dedications to HR 7 and then sent that back over to the House for an agree. And the House added additional to HR 7 and sent that back to the Senate, or SR 8 and sent it back to the Senate for an agree. We also have standalone dedications in more significant events, so that would be SR 231. And this is in honor of the 5 fallen officers shown here. That's Officer Jeremy Labonte, Deputy Sheriff Brandon Cunningham, Patrolman Christopher Lee Ruse, Officer Scott Reiner, and Trooper Jimmy Sinazar. HR 7 featured a dedication of significance to this board, and that is the interchange of I-75 and US 280 in Cordial, and I'll pause here.
Yeah, Abby, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to say something about this resolution. And let me preface that with Josh. Thank you for a great job in the legislature, and Abby, you as well, for the good job this session. I did want to mention and thank Representative Noah Williams for sponsoring this bill, and Abby, thank you so much for following this. This bill means a lot to me personally. I know it means a lot to a lot of people on this board who knew Johnny Floyd. For those of y'all that on the board, you know him. Some of you from the legislature knew him. Some of you may not know Johnny, but Johnny had the heart of a public servant. In fact, his heart was solid gold. Johnny was a wonderful person. This means a lot to me. Johnny was a close personal friend that predated my legislative service. We were wonderful friends in the House, and he loved this DOT board. And Russell and I have shared many funny stories about Johnny and many great memories of Johnny. And I'm looking forward to us having a dedication, hopefully some of the members of this board, as well as the commissioner and the chairperson who knew Johnny quite well. Maybe we'll have a celebration with the Floyd family and honor a former DOT board member who gave so much to this board and this department and gave so much to this state. But I'll thank you, Abby. Abby she was almost weekly giving me updates, sometimes daily, where we were on this. And I appreciate very much you doing this. It means a lot to this board. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
If I may also, Abby, add my appreciation to you for marshaling this through. I did not know Johnny Floyd, but I had the privilege of sitting in this seat following him in public service to Congressional District 2. And in the last 2+ years that I've traveled throughout that district, I do not go into a town, a city, or a county to meet with officials without them saying, wow, Johnny was terrific. What a great public servant he was. What a good DOT representative he was. And so I had the honor of talking with him on the phone a couple of times during the process, and he was such a gentleman. He was you could tell he had just a kind nature. But I couldn't let this go by without saying that he was incredibly respected in Congressional District 2, and I appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you. This is the complete list of road dedications. We have 4 interchanges, 11 intersections, 19 roadways, and 10 bridges. Here's the remaining. After the governor signs this, we will be reaching out to the legislators, the corresponding GDOT district, and all of you with the road dedications on next steps for fabrication and placement of signs.
Question. Quick question. Dates for any of these dedications?
Nothing yet. It hasn't been signed. The deadline's May 14th.
Okay, you'll come back with the dates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And then finally, we have 2 Senate study committees that passed the Senate but still would need to be picked by the Lieutenant Governor for ultimate appointment. The first being SR 216. This is sponsored by Senator Elena Parent, and it's the Senate Study Committee on Vulnerable Roadway Users. It will seek to investigate the conditions, needs, issues, and problems related to pedestrians and cyclists in Georgia. The next is SR 283. This was sponsored by Senator Brandon Beach, who was recently appointed as U.S. Treasurer. This is the Senate Study Committee on Height Restrictions surrounding Georgia airports. And this will be made up of 4 senators, including the Senate Transportation Chair, Greg Dolezal, Commissioner McMurray, or his appointee, and GMA President and the ACCG President. This will look at the legal options to restrict structure heights on property adjacent to airports and assess the financial and safety impacts. And I stand for any questions, or I can flip it over to Josh.
Thank you very much, Abby, for the excellent job, and I'll say a little bit more on that when at the end. But to the point, I'd like to echo the remarks about Board Member Floyd, and to another point, when that that dedication is held, and I apologize, I don't have a mock-up available for you today, but when that dedication is held and moving for all dedications moving forward, our signs are going to be updated to include at the bottom of them for this year to be the 2025 General Assembly, Georgia General Assembly, to reflect that it was adopted by the Georgia General Assembly. This is consistent with other states. It came to us at the request of the House Transportation Committee Chairman and in consultation with the Senate Transportation Chairman and working with the Commissioner. They were able to make that move so that all the signs moving forward will have that. We'll give you a mock-up of that to show what it'll read. It'll essentially just be at the bottom. It'll say 2025 Georgia General Assembly. So let me pivot real fast to the federal update. And so not much here except that, last month we talked about the President signing the law of full year CR, so continuing resolution for the remainder of the year, with one caveat to the benefit of transportation is that it included language that ensured that we're funded the levels, states are funded the levels they were supposed to be under the IIJA. So we won't take the same kind of haircut that other agencies might have taken from lack of an inflation adjuster. Now, there are a few other exemptions. So that is the law. We are still on the mechanical side of it. The department's still waiting for that to cascade down, the funding to be physically loaded and available for being drawn down. So that hasn't taken place, but I think the expectation is that should be done soon. So those funds will be available for authorization and being able to advance projects. Beyond that, we're still in this window. We talked about, you have the annual appropriations, but then we have the bigger reauthorization. IIJA is the current authorization. That comes due again next year. We're anticipating the committees to develop, I know commissioners mentioned it before, we're anticipating the committees to begin developing those bills and those outlines of those bills this year. So we're in a period of time now over the next 2 months where the USDOT, Congress are continuing to collect ideas on what should be in the next reauthorization. So as a department, we'll stay heavily engaged in that. And certainly if any board members if you all have any insight or things that you would like to escalate or highlight for reauthorization, we'd certainly, I know the commissioner and others would be glad to hear it. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions on the federal side. And then I just want to go back and just take a moment to say, again, my thank yous. Again, you saw Abby up here, and I want to give her a huge congratulations. So when it comes to the road dedication program, and we talk about, big, huge budgets, billion-dollar budgets. We talk about legislation that changes the statute. But for most members of the General Assembly, one of the most impactful things they're ever able to do is get a dedication back home. And so the coordination of that process is of critical importance to individual legislators. That might be the only thing that they do of consequence in any given legislative session. And so Abby does a great job of managing that, keeping a master spreadsheet of all of she got a shout out from the committee, as well as Abby Day, who works for Chairman Jaspers, the House Transportation Committee. They work very closely in concert to make sure those advance. So again, I'd like to say thank you to her, our legislative intern team. Every year we have a couple of interns switch off a couple of days. Morgan and Parker were our interns this year. We certainly appreciate all of their help. And then the board, appreciate all your support. I get the privilege of coming up here and giving the legislative update, but really when session's in, it's an all hands on deck exercise from all the folks behind here, every SME, the district engineers, because when the legislators are in town, they're still having issues from back home, so they're coming to us, and then we're circling back with our DEs, as you all know, and so they're on the front lines as well. So appreciation to everyone for all their work, all of our SMEs, all of the offices involved in that response. So just with that, thank you to everybody, and I will stand for if there are any questions.
Thank you, Thank you.
All right.
If that's all the questions, then we'll stand adjourned.
I'll see everybody here at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.